Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Carter, for being responsive and coming by and talking to us, not just in preparation for this particular position, but in years in the past. So I appreciate that very much. I have 6 things real quickly, 2 of which will be something for the record I'd like to get back from you, but they're more specific than some of the general things that were talked about by the other questioners on this panel. One would be, and I have to go back historically and look at this, one of the deficiencies that we've had for a long period of time has been in our non-line of sight cannon, our Inhofe cannon. I can remember back when I was in on the House Armed Services Committee many years ago, and we talked about that. Then along came the Crusader. We developed that over a period of time, and it was I hate to say this as a Republican about a Republican president, but it was President Bush in 2002, with just no warning at all, at least to me, terminated that program. General Shinseki came along and started working on a future combat system that would go farther than just an Inhofe cannon. But nonetheless, we're still operating and had been up until recently where there are 5 countries, including South Africa, that have a better Inhofe cannon than we do. And this isn't what the American people expect. So on this particular program, I disagreed with all those. However, the PIM program now that you and I talked about, the Paladin Integrated Management, is now the Army's lead fire support modernization effort. And I think it's moving along well now, but judging from the past, when we had our programs, the Crusader, the FCS, all moving along fine, all of a sudden something happened. So I'd just like to have you make any comments that you might have concerning this program, seeing it through, and its significance.
Well, it certainly is significant, Senator, and I'm personally involved in the acquisition strategy for Paladin PIM, so I'm very familiar with it. We're crafting that acquisition strategy now. The Army Acquisition Executive has that ball. She's doing a really good job of it, and I think it's a well-managed activity.
All right. Several up here have talked about the F-35. It's one that certainly is a great concern. The Pentagon recently sent a report to Congress on the Chinese military warning, and I'm quoting now. It said China's military has benefited from robust investment in modern hardware and technology. Many modern systems have reached maturity and others will become operational in the next few years. And one of those investments that they have been talking about is their new J-20 stealth fighter. You say the same thing about Russia with its 5th generation fighter, the T-50. The F-35 being our only 5th generation fighter, I am more concerned now about it than I was before, back when the termination of the F-22 came along. But I understand the missions of both of them and what can be done with the F-35. But when you stop and think about the need, as I recall, when this program first came, it was 2001, they were anticipating 2,852 copies. That's what they talked about at that time. Now, since that time, reports such as the 2 that I just mentioned from Russia and China have, to me, if our amount, the number that we should have had was 2,800 back in 2001, it would be actually more now. But you are now looking at 2,443 of the F-35s that would be required by our Air Force, Navy, and Marines. I've often wondered why it's fewer now in the absence of the F-22 and with the developments that are taking place in Russia and China. Do you feel that number is adequate? You know, I know that you're involved in that, but also I know that you might have a different opinion.
No, that is the joint requirement right now, 2443 for the U.S. force, and then, of course, there are additional F-35s that are going to be built for the partner nations. I did do a Nunn-McCurdy certification this past summer as required by law of the F-35 program, and in the course of that, our independent cost analysis and program evaluation shop did an assessment of the need for the Joint Strike Fighter, because part of the certification, as part of the certifying a program that is in non-McCurdy breach, as JSF is, I have to ascertain whether there are alternatives that could replace it. We did not find alternatives to the Joint Strike Fighter, no other alternative that met the joint requirement that exists, that joint meaning there's an Air Force variant, a Navy variant, and a Marine Corps variant.
Why don't you, Phil, get me some detail for the record, concentrating on the figure that was used in '01, the developments in Russia and China, and then that reduced figure today, just for the record.
Will do.
Now, you were in my office. You gave me this cute little thing here to carry around, and I've done it. No one understands it. I don't understand it. I don't think you understand it. But it is very, very complicated. What I've done is blow this up, and for my colleagues up here, let me tell them what we're talking about here. This is the Federal Acquisition Rule. This is how we do business. And I look at this and I feel a little bit like Kit Bond, although he's not here with us anymore, but he used to carry these around. When you look at the complications that are there, and Senator McCain referred to this also, there are 1,680 policy documents and 91 laws affecting FARs. Here they are right here. Now, we know it can be done faster. We've made exceptions. We have developed alternative procedures in working groups and organizations such as JIDO. As I mentioned to you, that's the IED technology that's coming along. I'm very proud of Mike Barbaro, Lieutenant General Mike Barbaro, who brought his team in and looked at what we can do. And I just sat there and I thought, this is something that's happening today. We're responding. We can come up with something and have it in the field almost in a week. And if that's possible, I get the impression that as complicated as this is, the FAR Council is made up of the Administrator of the Federal Procurement Policy, Secretary of Defense, Administrator of National Aeronautics and Space, and Administrator of the General Services. I think they're just kind of too busy to get into this thing and get their hands dirty and fix it. Do you have any alternatives to overcome this process if we're not able to do it by getting those four entities in one room until it's done?
First of all, for those who haven't had the joy of contemplating that chart, that shows the budgeting process, the acquisition process, and the requirements process in one big chart. And I was in an earlier conversation joking with the senator that anybody who could master all of that probably would get pretty frustrated with how ponderous it is. And Mike Barbaro, the really superb director of JIADO, with whom I work every day, does things differently, and we can do things differently. I said in my opening statement, I have two priorities now. One is supporting the warfighter in the here and now, and the other is managing all our programs and activities. When we do things like MRAP or JIADO, we can't follow that because the battlefield changes too fast, and we can't wait. And so one of the things I also, in response to Senator McCain, who was saying, can't we turn yet more pages and do things differently? One of the things I think we have ahead of us now is to try to take the experience of the wars and apply that to our usual FAR-driven acquisition system and see if we can't take some of the lessons of what I call the fast lane and apply them to the FAR and review the FAR. So
because that's good, and it has worked, and I ask unanimous consent that this be made a part of the record at this point in the record. And I know my time's expired, and I was going to get into the Army ground vehicle. Almost everything that I said about the endless cannon would apply to that too. This is a system, and it was in 2009 said the Army has to modernize those 16,000 fighting vehicles for the future, or we are going to put soldiers in harm's way. That was 2009. And so for the record, I'd like to have you address that, as well as in Afghanistan. I know in our Oklahoma 45th, we've lost now 10 people already. And it's one I'm very, very close to, a specialist, Chris Horton. And I look at these results come in, and I look at the question of reducing our numbers and how we're going about it. So I'd like for the record to have you evaluate that for both Iraq and Afghanistan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe.